Hello and welcome to The Stack. This week, we welcome to our studio Marie-Pierre Lannelongue, editor-in-chief of M, le magazine du Monde, on the new issue of M International, and Equator, a new magazine that wants to unravel the Western-centric look at the news and culture. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. As you know, Stack listener, I am a big fan of M, le magazine du Monde, the weekly title that comes with Le Monde every single Saturday in France. It's a thing of beauty, a beautiful mix of politics, fashion, design. They also publish biannually M, le magazine du Monde International, with stories in English, a selection of some of their best stories they've published in the last 6 months, but all curated in a very nice way. The theme for issue 3 is The Legends. It was a pleasure to welcome the editor-in-chief of M, Marie-Pierre Lannelongue, to our studio here at Midori House. Thank you so much for coming here. First time in our office, right?
Yes, it is. It's so impressive and beautiful. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Well, I was reading that actually next year there'll be 15 years of M, le magazine du Monde. That's a special date, right?
Yes, 15 years. So we begin to work on a celebration year, probably with a new festival that we are going to organize probably in next November, and also a collector birthday issue in September, because the first issue was on September 23 in 2011.
You know, M, le magazine du Monde and Le Monde in general, they make me feel quite excited about, what print can do in that way. And I know through numbers that actually Le Monde is still doing very well in France in terms of circulation, which is great news in a time like this, right?
Yes, the circulation is really, really good, especially because we are a digital brand with strong print products, print objects. But Le Monde now, and the magazine as well, is of course a digital newspaper. But we remain linked to the print. We still believe in print. And I think we still believe in print because we are very strong on digital. We have all those readers, this big circulation, and now we try to develop the brand in English to have, yes, a community of English-speaking person. So yes, I think digital and print are linked together today.
You mentioned the English, and I think it's so important because even before, when perhaps there wasn't an English presence, you make that magazine every single week, and every single week is beautiful, packed with interesting profiles, design stories, and much more. But then, yes, it was very much for the French market.
Yeah.
So you wanted to expand a little bit, in a way, the people that could read those stories, right?
Actually, yes, we wanted to expand. Le Monde launched an English digital version, Le Monde in English, 3 years ago. And yes, I think, of course, we are a French, like baguette. We are French. But thanks to Instagram, actually, we could gain an international image. And after some years, probably 2 or 3 years, we realized that the people here in England, in the United States, they knew what M was. Through the images, they had an impression of what M was. And after probably 3 years or 4 years, I don't remember, all the people, when we asked the photographer, the talents, the stylists, the artists, when we asked them to work with M, they said, okay. But when they arrived in Paris, or when we met them, like in London or New York, they said, I'm so proud, but actually, I don't know M. I never read M. I know that M is cool, that M is interesting, but I don't have the experience because we don't translate. That's the first point. But because we don't sell M abroad, because it's too expensive to, can you imagine 52 week a year to send or ship the magazine, like here in London or in New York or in Mexico City. I mean, economically speaking...
Difficult.
No, difficult, if not more.
Yes.
And a lot of people, we had DM messages, and a lot of people, they said, oh my God, it's beautiful, but where can I buy a copy? So after those years, we first issued M International before COVID. Probably it was too big with a very beautiful paper. It was too much. Mm-hmm. And then the COVID occurred. So
it was massive, I remember.
Yeah, well, it was, I mean, it was like a caprice d'enfant, probably. And after COVID, it was impossible, especially because the price of paper was so high. I mean, I think it rose 40% at one point. So we gave up. But last year, we think that we could try again with a more realistic international and always a very editorial point of view. We wanted to offer this community of people, to offer the full M experience. That is to say that we work on a selection which is more than a best of the season, really with an editorial point of view. We want to, of course, show the most beautiful images that we produce, but also we want to offer the strong stories that we publish every week. That is to say, we want to talk about fashion, about lifestyle, about design, but also about politics, about society, because that's the point with M. We mix all those fields.
And you said it beautifully. I have the new issue of M. Le Magazine du Monde International, issue 3. And yes, it is a compilation of the best you do, but in English. But it doesn't feel like just a rehash. It feels like it is its own magazine, the way, because of course you have so much material to pick. So to curate those articles must be quite challenging as well, right?
It is interesting, actually. It is interesting. You're right. It's not a best of, it's a curation.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. And we have a theme every issue, every season. We have 52 issues a year, every week, and I consider those 2 issues of M International at the 53rd and the 54th. We work on this issue exactly the way we work every week, actually. We ask ourselves, which stories are the most relevant? Which stories speak about the world we live in? Even if the world we live in is so scary. So, of course, it's not that scary. It's also a kind of postcard we send to our readers from France. But yes, I mean, it's not just a lifestyle magazine. It's Le Monde, the world, and we speak also about the world we live in.
And, if you don't mind, maybe let's talk about some of the highlights.
Of course.
A personal one for me was the profile you did on Vanessa Paradis as well, because I think I'm fascinated by her, I love her music. I know she released a new album. And perhaps here in English press, there's not much, about her, even though she's such a big name in France still. So tell us some of the highlights. I mean, Vanessa can be one, right?
Vanessa is a French monument, probably.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
Because she was 14 years old. Me personally, we are more or less the same age. It's all of my life. I mean, I know Vanessa for years and years and years. I think I'm 2 years older than she is. So she was here all the time, working with the best French artists, with Serge Gainsbourg, with Benjamin Biolay, with M, but also with Lenny Kravitz. And she's an actress as well. She was married to Johnny Depp. And actually, what we realized that she's a big star, but she remains the young girl that she was when she started. That is to say that she grew up with the press, and sometimes it was very violent for her because when she was 14, she was this kind of Lolita, and the press...
Jolette Taxi vibes.
Yeah, but I mean... Now we realize with the Me Too movement that, yes, she was this very young, sexualized girl, and the press was really hard. Even the people in the street, and she remembers that very well. And also, at a very young age, she was that big star with all the media attention and all her love affairs and the children that she had with Johnny Depp. I mean, she was on the press all the time, and I think she's very... probably she has been deeply hurted by that. And she remained, even if she's this star, this superstar in France, she's weak. And the pictures taken by Karim Sadli, the photographer, who is a very good friend of Vanessa, I think it was okay and great. But the interview was really hard for the journalist because she didn't like the question, and the question, they were not intrusive. It was not just question of a journalist, a normal journalist, but she remains this fearful young woman, young girl that she was. And so it was a bit difficult. And what
Interesting to read, nevertheless, right?
Yes. And so we had a lot of debate about what to write. And we decided to write with a strong respect for what she is. And we understand exactly the life she had, under the media eye all the time for all those years, probably 40 years of career. It's a lot. Never quiet, never exactly private life. So we clearly understand, but we consider it was our duty to explain the life that she had. And that's the case with all the stars, arriving at 14 years old.
And again, that's the M style as well, because a lot of artist profiles you see these days, it does look like a press release. It's so tightly controlled. And in the end, you don't learn anything new, Don't you see that a little bit, So it's quite good that you're still, valuing journalism in that sense.
It's really important for us because we have strong respect for the artist and also we are journalists and we see the communication machine. Nowadays, I mean, the pop stars, it's so difficult. You have 10 minutes for the interview, 15 to make the pictures. They want to read the final story. With us, of course, they can read their quotes, but not because it's journalism.
Exactly.
But nowadays, with the social medias, the fact that they can control exactly their image and what they say, sometimes they don't understand that, yes, we are in a democracy, and in a democracy, free press is something. That is not to say free speech in the American sense, the American definition. Free press, journalism is about having a point of view of things with a great respect for the artist and the talents. And yes, I think that's what we wanted to do with Vanessa Paradis, because it's a strong aspect of her story and her personality, and we deeply understand what it is to start in the life at 14 years old like that.
Very well said. Maybe another thing I would like to ask you, I love the imagery of your magazine, and I'm very glad one of my favorite shoots, this year was the Red Alert by Emmanuel Out. It was so sexy, vibrant, and it was really exciting to see as well. Your fashion is on point on the magazine. So what's the importance of your kind of fashion coverage as well in shoots like this?
Actually, journalism is very important for us. Writing is very important because we offer very long story to read. And we consider that the image must be at the same level. That is to say that the stylist and the photographer, they are authors as well as journalists, and they express themselves. And yes, after Emmanuel Alt left Vogue, I consider very important because she's a myth. She's the French stylist, Emmanuel Alt. And so I called her and I said, do you think that you could make your first story after Vogue with a French magazine like M? And she said, okay, and thank you, but don't be afraid. I will not make the same kind of image that I used to do for French Vogue. It's Vogue Paris. And what I like with the red story, it's so Emmanuel, so sexy, but it's not Vogue Paris. And she was very happy because, she's used to work with Inès Evinhoud or David Sims, and she was very happy because on this story, she started a collaboration with Anthony Seclaoui, who is a young Lebanese French photographer. I think he's, of course, 25 years old. And it was really interesting to see the meeting of two generations, and she was so happy with that. I mean, to work with a young photographer, and he was very happy as well. That's one of the reasons why I particularly love this red alert story.
I love it as well. I do.
Thank you.
I do love it. And
thank you.
And finally, Marie-Pierre, you are here in London you're doing a few events here and there for Le Magazine du Monde. How's the reception so far? I was in New York recently. I know you're also selling there. So clearly there's a lot of interest from here in Britain, in the UK and in other countries as well.
Well, I must be honest. I mean, yes, the reception is really nice and people are enthusiastic, but I mean, they are not like 100 or, thousands of people going to the newsstand to buy M International. It remains a niche phenomenon, of course. But yes, I think that the people are interested in that. And also what is interesting is that our colleague from D magazine in Italy, they do the same. They translate.
Also quite beautiful.
Yeah, quite beautiful. A bit different because we are different. M and D are not exactly the same kind of paper. But I find it very interesting that in this world, when you don't speak English, you have the impression that you are like in the suburb of press and you feel a little bit complex sometimes. And yes, I'm very happy and proud that at the same time, Emanuele Farnetti and his team, they had more or less the same idea. And yes, I mean, if you do a good job, yes, you can compete with those Anglo-Saxon people who sometimes are,
we need a different point of view as well,
Thank you very much, because that's exactly what I hope, is to arrive with our point of view, French in a way, but a new and different point of view.
Merci Marie-Pierre. Issue 3 of M International is out now in the best newsstands around the world. And the weekly issue of M comes with Le Monde every Saturday in France. It's worth a read. And now, a new launch, Equator, a new magazine of politics, culture and art. It is a publication that is looking to avoid the Anglophone West-centric look at the world. Self-described as a movement as much as a magazine, in Equator you'll be able to read long-form stories with public events, reading groups, screenings and a print version as well to follow. It was a pleasure to welcome to our studio the founding editor, Gavin Jacobson, and editor, Samanth Subramanian. I wonder, perhaps I'll start with you, Gavin. I would like an introduction. What is Equator? You need to give us a little introduction here.
Yeah, so Equator really emerged out of a kind of collective conversation among a sort of group of writers and editors in the winter of 2023. All of us at that time were working in or writing for sort of, established legacy media that boasted, long histories and impressive sort of mastheads. But I think individually we each felt that they were sort of limited or inadequate to the kind of historical moment that we found ourselves in. And, this wasn't down to sort of individual failure so much as that these titles were created and established, for a world and in a world that we think doesn't really sort of exist anymore. Our sort of sense is that we're emerging into what might be called a sort of post-American age, a genuinely sort of multipolar order where the US and its sort of satellites can no longer sort of dictate the terms of reference for the rest of the world. And yet the media still seem to operate as if the sort of post-Cold War, end of history narrative, this notion that all countries would ultimately converge on a kind of American model, they sort of operated as if that was still intact, as if Western assumptions should be the frame for understanding events everywhere. And so we decided that we would try and create something new that really reckoned with this transformation, a kind of space that, equates, hence the name Equator, that sort of equates the perspectives and intellectual traditions and lived experiences and ideas and histories of the rest of the world with those in the sort of, Anglo-American orbit. So really Equator was a kind of an answer to a question we all had, which was, what would a publishing venture look like for this kind of post-American world?
And Samanth, I think this is super interesting. And I agree because, look at the media here, let's say in the UK or even in most Western countries. There's kind of a very samey kind of point of view as well. I really noticed that. So I think there is a space for a title like Equator, right?
I think so. There's a kind of ideological insularity as well, a kind of centrism that increasingly in a polarized world seems to be completely out of place and seems to be unwilling to call out lies on any side of the political spectrum. But I think it goes further back even in this particular moment. I think if you go back 6 or 7 or 8 years or 9 years, if you go back to the first Trump election, if you go back to the Brexit vote, you find that some of these publications have clearly grown incapable of even taking the temperature of their own populations. They don't know the public mood and they struggle to understand it. And then repeatedly they fall down again and again on the job of covering the rest of the world in an accurate way, or at least in a way that's not instrumental. It's been a long time, I think, since an American publication wrote about China, not because it matters to American economic interests, but just because it's China qua China. And I think we wanted to bring back some of that intellectual curiosity about the rest of the world. And then, of course, I think the more immediate trigger for all of this has also been how some of these publications have covered the war in Gaza and the genocide in Gaza and how unwilling they've been to call out Israel's brutalism and label this for what it is, to call out the lies, to do proper investigations. All of this has just mounted over the last 2 years. So there's a reason why Gavin said the winter of 2023, because this happened on October 7th, and immediately afterward, the lies and the prevarication started. And so I think that's really, all of these frustrations with the legacy publications had built up in a lot of our minds and tipped us over the edge when it came to starting Equator.
And Gavin, tell us about the team for Equator. Did you put together, a selection of writers from, I guess, different backgrounds, different countries as well? So tell us a bit more about the behind the scenes. Who is in charge of Equator?
Wish we knew.
Yeah. That's a good question. The team really sort of emerged organically. There wasn't actually a huge amount of sort of formal thought behind it. It was more, there was a group of us who started having a conversation about this, the kind of conversation that you might have with friends in a bar or in a restaurant. And then we thought, well, who else would we like to invite in to have this conversation with us? And it's from there that we really began to kind of bring people in different parts of the world with different sort of intellectual backgrounds and intellectual curiosities and preoccupations. And because we're a sort of startup, I guess, we're all wearing many hats at the moment in terms of divisions of labour. There's like a core editorial team who are looking after the copy that we have coming in, and then there's people who are sort of a little bit more involved in the production side. And then, after we sort of launch, really the intention is to make the magazine aspect of Equator the kind of gateway into an equally rich and kind of diverse world of, live conversations, reading groups, podcasts, seminars, so we really see that the written journalism is a way that we hope for people, we can sort of bring them into our community, but ultimately we want them to have a much richer experience than just reading our kind of writing.
And someone you mentioned before about intellectual curiosity, but one thing I have to say, the first time I came across Equator, I think was kind of the imagery of it as well. It's super cool, I have to say. That also kind of say, oh, hold on, what is that? It catches your eye. I think that's a good start, even before seeing any of the content itself.
And you haven't even seen our website, which is also eye-catching and very distinctly different from, the plain sort of white boxes that you come to expect with some of these publications. But the intellectual curiosity part is, I think, really important. We don't want to just cover, for example, what might be called the global south. just because it's there. This is not service journalism. We're not being perfunctory about it. It's not a duty to do it. We are all genuinely very interested in the ideas that are circulating in India and China and Nigeria and Latin America. I mean, these are
powerful countries, right? They really
powerful
matter.
and young countries. And this is sort of where the future is being forged. These are economies on the rise. They have, for the first time, perhaps in decades, they have a generation coming up that is witnessing the decline of American soft power and American democracy. And they are being forced to think of alternatives for this. And they're finding those alternatives. And I think that's enormously powerful and interesting. And that's what we want to tap into.
It was really important from us from the very beginning that we had a distinctive look and that we didn't just, have another Substack or, use a kind of basic WordPress template. That the design really reflected the values that we're trying to aspire to achieve. So sophistication without being exclusive, serious but not austere, inclusive, not sort of exclusionary. And so we worked in particular with a designer, a Paris-based designer, to create something quite bespoke. So, a custom typography, a kind of layout that really privileges long-form journalism, various kind of visual features that hail from kind of different aesthetic traditions and not just a kind of default Western kind of modernist thing. And ultimately, really what we wanted to signal is that, while Equator is a space for serious thinking, it's not like a closed circle, and that sort of anyone is sort of welcome to join us.
That's a very good point. And I just want to continue with you, Gavin, about, the website will be out, of course, very soon, but there are plans for print. So tell us about this division. At the beginning, there will be plenty of content online. So how are you moving to print in the coming weeks or months?
Perhaps? Yeah, so I think we spent a lot of time talking about this, and the feeling was that we really want to establish ourselves digitally first, start growing an audience, establishing a kind of publishing rhythm. But we're all, I think, deeply committed to the idea of print, the kind of the sort of wonderful serendipity that comes through flicking through the magazine, the fact that print really demands a certain level of attention for the kind of writing and the kind of reading experience. And it's also something that we think that we can, it's another aspect that we can help try and build a community, something that people can receive, they can share, they can photograph and post, something that hopefully will look kind of iconic or have a kind of an iconicity about it. But first, we really wanted to kind of prove the concept digitally first, and then the plan will be to introduce a print product next year.
Amazing. Samanth, I wonder if you can give us perhaps a preview of some of the stories that you'll be covering. I wonder what are you allowed to mention?
Yeah. We have a big slate of stories that will be published towards the end of October. And we have writers in here who are new, who've never been published in English before.
That's perfect.
We have writers who are veterans in the English publishing language, who have written books and magazine articles, but are frustrated like us with some of the old stodginess of Western publishing. I'll give you a hint to my two favorite pieces that are being published in October. They're both by Chinese writers. One is a Chinese travel writer who's traveled to the Central Asian republics and has kind of adopted and imbibed the story and the traditions of most Western travel writers, but has inverted these traditions in a way knowingly, because he does know that the age in which the Western travel writer finds subjects to write about in predominantly his country's sphere of influence, those days are coming to an end. And these republics, the Central Asian republics, are now very squarely in China's sphere of influence. So this is very much a writer going out of China, looking at these countries for the first time and thinking about their relationship to his own country. And it's a fascinating piece, full of insight and humor and just a very dry wit that I really enjoy. And the other one, which also coincidentally happens to be by a Chinese journalist, he's from Inner Mongolia, which is a province in China. And he used to be a journalist for a long time at a publication run by the Communist Party of China until he eventually emigrated to the US. But his account of what it's like to be a journalist at a state-run publication, the Chinese Communist Party's version of the New Yorker is what he calls it. His account of what it's like to write there and research there and travel around the country as a reporter is extremely honest, very funny, very knowing again, and just a really acute insight into how a particular part of the world lives. And I really like these two. I mean, I'm sure Gavin has his own favorites among the stories that are coming out in October.
I think the one that I'm most excited about is by a writer from Niger who's written about the experience of what it was like to go from what was known as sort of Soviet mania to, when the Cold War ended, to sort of state mania, and how his experience of travelling to the US, his first kind of trip outside of Niger, was, felt like to him that he was sort of ascending to a higher plane of existence. But then he describes really wonderfully the sort of disillusionment that came with going to America. But there's just these wonderful kind of moments where he describes how, in the bookstores in Niger, they had like Progress Publishers, which was the Soviet arm, the kind of publishing arm, and how sort of almost overnight all of these books were removed from the shelves and used to wrap meat, and they were replaced by the kind of CIA's equivalent publishing house, and how the books were then kind of put up. And it's just this wonderful kind of, I mean, I think what it does so well, what I think is like a classic Equator piece, which is looking at how the particular unfolds into the universal, but without losing any of its kind of specificity. So it's just a really wonderful kind of piece of memoir.
I mean, these pieces that we've mentioned might sound like what in the trade are called human interest pieces, but equally we have at least one hard-hitting investigation that'll drop in late October, early November. There's one piece about a murder case that's fascinating. There's a huge and very angry essay that is connected to the war in Gaza. And so I think like there's a mix of tonality as well in our publication. We don't just want to be all soft stories or all angry essays. We just want to be a mix of everything that you might like to read about the world but never knew where to look for.
Well, so far I want to read it all. Very curious. And a question, I know it's early days, but what about the business model? Are you thinking about subscription? Of course, the print's coming soon, I think we can say that. How will it work in that sense? Will it be free for people to see it, or you have to pay a fee every month?
That's a really good question. And, we spent a long time thinking about this, seeing what best practices were happening in other publications or where we could learn from the things that they had tried and maybe they'd not come off. I think we're going to adopt a kind of membership structure where the pieces themselves, the writing will be free to read. But what we quickly realised is that people are sort of hungry for a sort of parasociality. They want to feel like that they're not just passive recipients of content, but they have some kind of connection to the title with the people who are making it. And so we're sort of devising a membership structure in which for certain levels of tier, you get different levels of access, basically. And that will also include, discounts to our events and our online seminars and our reading groups and so on. And again, it's really, the aspiration for us is to really sort of bring people together in physical and online spaces. And so the membership structure that we're devising will kind of reflect that.
I mean, I think the premise here is that just as we living here in London feel these frustrations with the media and we feel these kind of ideological nigglings about the state of the world, our premise is that there are people all around the world who feel the same way. They're distributed extremely widely. They have a kind of cosmopolitanism about them. They've lived in several countries. They maybe speak 1 or 2 languages or 3 languages. They read widely and they're interested in what the rest of the world has to say to them. And our objective is to bring all of these people into the Equator community and to knit these people together in ways that they didn't think was possible. Somebody living in Pakistan writing an essay that somebody in Brazil reads, and they discover this thrill of recognition in that essay, that somebody else thinks the same way that they do. And we feel that community is sort of alive and well, but just kind of very dispersed at the moment.
Thank you, Gavin and Samanth. You can find out more information about Equator on equator.org. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks to our editor, Christy O'Grady. If you have any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, you can always listen again at monocle.com or subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.